Good evening. Environment, Revenue and Taxation, Labor, Procurement, and Statistics Research and Planning is calling this virtual public hearing to order. The time is now 5:35 p.m. on Monday, January 25th, 2021. Notice of this evening's virtual hearing was provided via email to senators, stakeholders, and the local media on January 15th, 2021 for the 5-day notice and January 23rd for the 48-hour notice, thus meeting the requirements of open government law. I would like to acknowledge my colleagues that have joined me here today. Legislative Secretary Amanda Shelton, Senator Joe St. Augustine, Senator Jim Moylan, Senator Tello Taitigui, Senator Frank Blas Jr., and Senator Tony Atta. Oh, and Senator Talina Nelson. And I hope I didn't miss anybody. Oh, and Senator Mary Camacho Torres. So, oh, and Senator Chris Duenas. So I think as people pop in, I hope I can call on you. Okay, so the purpose of this virtual public hearing is to receive testimony on one bill, Bill 24-36 COR, sponsored by Senator James C. Moylan, co-sponsored by Senators Mary Camacho Torres, Christopher M. Duenas, and Frank Blas Jr. It's an act to amend sections 3105 of Article 1, Chapter 3, Title 22, Guam Code Annotated, relative to redating the implementation of the second tier of Public Law 35-38 from March 1st, 2021 to March 1st, 2022. The committee will continue to receive written testimony until 4 p.m. this Wednesday, January 27, 2021. Please address testimony to Senator Sabina Flores Perez, chairperson on this committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation, Labor, Procurement, and Bureau of Statistics and Plans, and can be dropped off to the mailboxes at the Guam Congress Building or emailed to office@senatorperez.org. So just to go over the rules of conduct for the virtual public hearing, the host of this hearing will mute all participants until called upon by the chair. Virtual background should not be utilized during public hearing. When called to speak, please remember to unmute yourself. The chairperson will open the floor to members wishing to pose questions to any individuals. Individuals testifying shall first be recognized by the chair before speaking and shall state their name for record-keeping purposes. And all questions shall be confined to the substance and nature of the agenda. Personal inference as to character or motive of senator or any individual testifying is not permitted, and any violations of this rule will result in removal from the public hearing by the host. So now to begin our agenda, Bill number 24-36 COR, sponsored by Senator James C. Moylan, co-sponsored by Senators Mary Camacho Torres, Christopher M. Duenas, and Frank Blas Jr. It's an act to amend section 3105 of Article 1, Chapter 3, Title 22, Guam Code Annotated, relative to redating the implementation of the second tier of Public Law 35-38 from March 1st, 2021 to March 1st, 2022. I would like to now offer the floor to the sponsor of the bill to provide introduction.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to my co-sponsors, Senator Mary Torres, Senator Chris Duenas, and Senator Frank Blas Jr. And thank you for the participation we have here tonight on our Zoom public hearing conference. As an introduction to the bill 2436, we understand that the COVID-19 pandemic has adversely impacted our economic conditions on the island, which has led to thousands of island residents on furlough status, and many businesses have either were forced to close their doors or amend their hours of operations and the amount of employees that they have. And they had to work with many limitations, and which all affected their present revenue stream. As we're aware, in 2019, the 35th Guam legislature passed what eventually was enacted into Public Law 3538. It's an act which would provide a two-tier approach towards increasing the minimum wage. It's a 50 cents increase. Minimum wage took place back, the first part, the 50 cents increase took place back in March 1st of 2020. Now the second tier is due this year on March 1st, 2021, the next 50 cents increase. But unfortunately, as we see, many businesses still are in the recovery phase. And with tourism arrivals and numbers seeming questionable for 2021 2021 and possibly 2022, it would be basically unreasonable to mandate an additional cost on the businesses at this time, many of which have challenges to maintain their 2020 pandemic organizational charts and annual projections. So this act is just simply to delay the enactment of the second tier, only to delay by 1 year the minimum wage increase, to allow businesses to plan their operation expenses based on these uncertainties. It would also help reduce the additional burden placed on those businesses this year who are attempting to bring back their employees back to work despite this economic conditions. But nonetheless, this bill does not prevent the employer to go ahead with that increase if they so feel fit. So, Madam Chair, I thank you for the opportunity to have the public hearing for 2436. I thank my co-sponsors and the panel here today, and we're looking forward to the conversation that will develop. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Moylan. I would like to also recognize the presence of the Honorable Speaker, Therese Terlahi, who has joined us as well. So before we go into the testimonies, I would like to read the fiscal note that was prepared from the BBMR. So it states, per previous correspondence with the Department of Labor for preparation of the fiscal note, a minimum wage increase from $8.75 to $9.25 will likely cause a direct impact to Department of Labor's employment and training program. The current cost per participant is $8.75 is $9,796. If the minimum wage increases to $9.25, the current cost per participant would be $10,356, resulting in a $560 increase. Absent an increase in federal funding for the program, Department of Labor may have to reduce work hours and/or the number of program participants. In the same correspondence to the Bureau, Department of Labor estimated that the number of government Guam employees that would be affected by an increase to $9.25 an hour is less than 250 employees. Further stating that the majority of these employees are program enrollees or work study participants under federally funded programs. The payroll costs to the government of Guam would be negligible. The effect on the overall economy and general fund revenues is expected to be approximately neutral overall and of a magnitude slight enough as to not create discernible changes to economic aggregates such as GDP, employment, and tax revenues. Should the proposed legislation become law, the above mentioned impacts will not take effect until March 1st, 2022. However, the Bureau notes Department of Labor's comments that the effects to the economy and revenues of Governor Guam would be nominal. So that's what the fiscal note states. So I would also like to acknowledge that we received quite a bit of testimony in support of Bill 24-36, all in favor, and from businesses throughout Guam. And I can probably list some of them. I'm sure we're still receiving testimonies as we speak. Just to name those, it's Westin Resort Guam, Payless Supermarket, Pacific Star, Guam Fast Food Inc., Guam Contractors Association, Chinese Chamber of Commerce, Guam, Crave Group, Asia Pacific Financial Management Group, NAKI KOS Corporation, Fruits, Triple J Guam, JL Baker & Sons, Baldaiga Group, Advanced Management, PHR Ken Micronesia, World Dining Inspirations Group, Guam Women's Chamber of Commerce. So some of them are here tonight to provide also oral testimony in addition to submitting the written testimony ahead of time. So, and now to begin testimonies. So I would like to call, who do we have here? Mary Rhodes to provide testimony.
Hafide, thank you, Senator Sabina. Thank you so much for having us today. On behalf of the Guam Hotel Restaurant Association, I would like to thank the senators who have sponsored Bill 24-36. JHRA appreciates the opportunity to provide supporting testimony for Bill 24-36, which is an act to delay the second minimum wage increase to March 1, 2022. Public Law 35-58 was enacted in 2019 as a two-tiered approach, with the first increase of 50 cents in March 1, 2020, and then the second one expected March 1, 2021. So we're just really asking for a 1-year delay. Businesses have had to make a very difficult decision or several difficult decisions throughout this pandemic by either closing their doors temporarily or permanently due to the pandemic and executive orders declaring a public health emergency. As a result, employers have had to right-size their operations and also reduce the workforce through furloughs, reduction in hours, and even layoffs. Of all of the business sectors, the accommodation, food services, and retail industries have been the hardest hit, with more than 16,000 jobs have been lost just alone in the tourism industry out of a total of approximately 27,000 individuals who have received the pandemic unemployment assistance, which has resulted in an unemployment rate of 17.3% as per the Guam Department of Labor. Despite the development of a new vaccine for COVID-19 and the $1.6 billion in COVID-19 related funding from the federal government, many are still wondering what recovery could look like and whether or not businesses will be able to survive long enough to reopen their doors to help drive the economy and stabilize the market. To make matters worse, jobs will be limited because of the dismal economic forecasts. Both the public and private sectors are seeing a decline in revenue outside the federal stimulus packages and/or grant funding. According to the 2020 Guam Economic Report by the University of Guam Small Business and Public Administration and Omicron Delta Epsilon International Honor Society for Economics, Alpha Chapter of Guam, this was reported in December 31, 2020. There are a couple of bullet points I wanted to refer to, and I will provide a copy of the full report together with my full testimony at the end of this session. Our tourism industry, so this is in quote from the study, our tourism industry was decimated with 76% less visitors coming to Guam during January through October 2020, compared to the same period in 2019. Less visitors to Guam in 2020 also means less spending, income, jobs, and tax revenues for our economy, with our estimate showing a loss of $1.38 billion. So without the federal dollars of $1.6 billion, we really haven't felt the impact of that because of the federal funding. But if we did not get that federal funding, we would extremely have felt that loss. Also a quote, in the absence of the $1.6 billion with federal government public assistance to Guam, the scenario would be expected to be worse. The economy in 2020 would have had a decline in the range of 42 to 49% compared to 2019. This would be worse than the 25% decrease in the US economy during the Great Depression years between 1929 and 1933. Inflation estimates for the first and second quarters of 2020 were down by a negative 0.6% and a negative 0.8%. So inflation hasn't taken place. Of the 27,000 individuals who are receiving PUA, 43.8% of those collecting PUA were still receiving income from their employers, but at significantly reduced hours, according to an article in the Guam Daily Post, published on December 7th, 2020. Therefore, according to the 2020 Guam Economic Report, 56.2% or 15,174 people are without jobs, without any hours, completely without jobs, and became unemployed during the pandemic, which is very close to the number of lost jobs in the tourism industry due to the decrease in visitor arrivals. Bottom line, the Guam's economic recovery will take time to rebuild, and we cannot afford any increases to the cost of doing business. Employers will not be able to quickly bounce back from this economic crisis, and businesses will be extremely careful when it comes to labor, overhead, and operating expenses. Businesses have been struggling and will continue to struggle without any market growth. With the current market conditions and weak tourism forecasts, Guam's economy and job market will have a very slow recovery, especially since we continue to remain closed as a destination and have no plans to reopen our tourism industry as long as we continue to have quarantine policies in place with limited air seat capacity with our airline partners who have not been planning to come to Guam even up until April of this year. On behalf of the Guam Hotel and Restaurant Association, its board and members, we strongly support Bill 24-36 to delay the second minimum wage increase to March 1, 2022. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Ms. Rhodes. Now I'd like to call upon Catherine Castro from the Guam Chamber of Commerce, or Guam Women's Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you very much. My name is Catherine Castro with the Guam Chamber of Commerce, and I thank you for the opportunity to provide comments on Bill number 24-36. You may recall that the Chamber requested a similar action last February in anticipation of the harmful effects the pandemic would have on our island economy. And since then, we have seen the actual impacts of how this global pandemic has devastated our local economic system. Prolonged lockdown measures imposed on our island and most of Asia, coupled with government-mandated stay-at-home orders and forced business closures, contributed to the significant loss of business and personal activity. Some companies have had to close for good because they just could not survive with little to no business, leaving more of our residents without jobs and worrying about how to put food on the table and pay their bills. As businesses take steps to safely rebuild, recover, and in some instances, reinvent their product and service offerings, putting off the implementation of an increase in the minimum wage will go a long way in assisting many entities keep their workers employed. Some industries have not fully recovered or have remained closed. When they finally are able to open their doors, we feel strongly that the one-year delay in the implementation of the minimum wage increase will help these companies get back on their feet. Should this measure pass, the moratorium does not preclude any employer from moving forward with the increased wage. This proposal would help those businesses that need the short-term support this delay would offer. The road to recovery is a long one, and we must all work together to support the rebuilding of our economy. Thank you for the opportunity to provide our comments, and we encourage you and all the senators to pass this measure.
Thank you so much, Ms. Castro, for your testimony. I would like to now recognize Sanjay Diwan, GHR member, for his testimony. Sanjay, if you can put on your video.
Yes, I'll just be submitting written testimony.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
The next one on the list is Christine Baleto of Pacific Fruits LLC. You're recognized, Christine. Just remember to unmute yourself, Ms. Baleto, before speaking in to the mic.
I'm sorry, Senator. My son was bothering me when we're doing her work from home. You still can't get a free minute, but thank you. Buenas and Hafade, Chairwoman Perez and committee members. For the record, my name is Christine Baleto, and I am testifying on behalf of my small business Fruits. Thank you for the opportunity to provide written as well as oral testimony on the proposed bill to delay the implementation of the minimum wage second tier increase from March 1st, 2021 to March 1st, 2022. Fruits is a quick service restaurant. It's a franchise business that I brought to Guam in 2010. We began with our Agana store in 2009 with 10 employees and opened our second store in 2010 at the Guam Premier Outlet. In 2014, we had 22 employees between the two stores and provided paid health insurance, a retirement plan, gym membership, and other employee benefits. After the implementation of the minimum wage increase in 2015, we had to reduce our staffing to 18, cut some benefits, and increase prices in order to absorb the significant increase in expenses. We not only had to contend with higher personnel costs, but increased prices from goods we purchased locally as well. It became extremely difficult to keep the business open with rising rent, food costs, utility costs, and taxes. When you raise the operating costs of a business, it doesn't just affect your own specific business, but it's felt through higher costs from other suppliers and vendors who must also raise their prices. As a small business, personnel costs are the single largest expense for the company. Our industry is extremely price sensitive to higher employee expenses and must quickly adjust staffing to reflect revenue for any given day, month, or year. Raising the minimum wage without the benefit of increased revenue generated by customers' increased purchases has a negative effect on our ability to remain open. Raising the minimum wage does not just affect entry-level employees. Supervisors and store managers who have worked hard for our company, thus affording them promotions and higher wages, would have to be raised too. It is incomprehensible to keep middle and senior personnel at the same levels when those below them are provided significant raises. Thus, overall personnel costs must be adjusted up. The results in an increase in personnel costs from 12 to 15%. A small business simply cannot afford this without commensurate increases in revenue. As a result of the added costs with the minimum wage in 2017, we were unable to absorb the higher costs and closed our Guam Premier Outlet store. The pandemic has had a devastating effect on all small businesses. For our Fruits Agana location, we were barely able to survive before the health crisis. After a few weeks of trying to hold on, we had to make the decision to shut down permanently. We had to lay off employees who had been with us for years. I cannot adequately describe the emotional pain a business owner feels at having to advise employees who have worked for them and worked hard that you can no longer provide them a job. Further, to close something that you have spent 10 years building, in which you put everything you own as collateral to pursue your dream, is painful. Some people believe that it's easy to be in business and that if you own one, you are rich. Quite the opposite is the case for a majority of business owners who are line staff, janitors, administration, runners. You're not rich. You're working long hours, essentially free of charge, to make your business successful. It's too late for us, senators. You have the ability to save others. The proposed wage increase threatens many of our businesses who have managed to hold on during this pandemic. We have already seen many shut down. These are not just small businesses, but iconic ones that have been in our community for years, employing our people, paying taxes, and donating goods and services. The minimum wage increase will increase expenses once again without any commensurate increase in revenue. In fact, many of our businesses have been forced to close with no revenue. The phased reopening, while necessary, has resulted in insufficient income to cover expenses. The proposed increase will be the proverbial nail in the coffin for many of them. When a business shuts down, all the employees that work for them will no longer have jobs. Laying off workers and thereby decreasing the number of people working in our community does not help address poverty levels and does not help those that need a job to support their families. For those that have lost their jobs, they would be in a worse position as they do not have the income and have to endure higher costs of living because of increased prices. Although we have temporary unemployment benefits available for them, this will eventually run out. We need to provide an environment where businesses can recover and rebuild, so when these benefits run out, our people will have jobs to return to. It is for this reason that we wholeheartedly support the proposed delay in the minimum wage increase and respectfully request that the committee members pass Bill 24-36. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Baleto, for your testimony. Appreciate that. So next on the list, I would like to recognize Gina Campos, Associate Broker for RE/MAX, to provide oral testimony.
Hi, Senators. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I'm just, here in support of this bill. I've been concerned about it since I realized it was coming down the new increase was gonna take place in March. And I just wanna kind of share with you what happened with our businesses as well. In 2019, the economy was going really well for a lot of businesses. Enjoyed the fruits of our hard work and the fruits of the hard work of our employees. We were able in 2009 to start for another one of our businesses. We actually offered medical insurance for the first time. It was a type of business where most of our employees were minimum wage workers. And for the first time in 2019, because the company was doing so well, we took a vote and we offered insurance to most of our management employees. Well, when the minimum wage increase went into effect, we ended up having to take a look at things. As cost goes up, you're not able to take care of your employees the way you wanted to. I understand the concept. I think the thought behind the minimum wage was to increase minimum wage. You're giving employees, I think that the concept was that you're effectively trying to take care of their livelihood and make sure that they're making ends meet, but that's not how it works out. If a business isn't profitable, if it's not making money, they cannot afford to take care of their employees, and something's got to give. You either take away benefits or you remove some of the employees or you cut their hours. That's just how it is for everybody. If the economy didn't take this turn because of COVID, I think maybe people would have found a way to make this work. But right now, in some of our businesses, we're only operating at 50%. At 50%, we cannot even afford to pay many of the costs of operating that business. So right now, businesses are struggling to figure out, what do you do? Do you let go more people? Do you eliminate more benefits if there's even any left? And I'm in support of this bill. Please put it off. I don't even think 1 year is enough, but at least put it off. Let's see what happens this year. So I'm full support, and I thank everybody for supporting the bill and moving it forward.
Thank you, Gina, for taking the time to provide testimony and your experience. And thank you. So now I'd like to recognize Dominic Hernandez, a community member, to provide testimony.
Half a day. Thank you, Senators, for your time. My name is Dominic J Hernandez. I'm speaking pretty much as a common citizen and currently somebody that is getting paid minimum wage as of today. And I do support the bill to go ahead and delay the minimum wage by next year. As the businesses have all spoken, everybody that has a business or represents businesses, it affects them a lot. And with me, I just recently got hired. And I would hate to see my company that just recently hired me have to reduce the amount of hours they were planning to give me, or possibly even let me go just because they have to now increase everybody's pay to $9.25 an hour. I'm one of the lucky ones that managed to find a job, and I would like to hold it as long as I possibly could, especially given the circumstances, and I want to stay off of unemployment. But by increasing the minimum wage, you're putting stress on the businesses, and the businesses have to do something in order to maintain the ability to make some kind of profit. As well, with the recent news with PUA saying that those who are on reduced hours are not eligible currently to receive any PUA benefits. The problem with that is, remember, every time we increase minimum wage, cost of everything else goes up. So those that are making, and I believe Guam Daily Post had stated this, that those that are getting reduced hours, they roughly make about $200 or less per week. If we increase minimum wage, sure, some people may get an increase on their wages, but what about those that are above minimum wage already? Let's say they're making $9.50 an hour, $9.75 an hour. they're stuck at that wage and the prices are going to increase. They're already have enough burdens and hardships to deal with just getting paid the $200 per week because they're uneligible for PUA now. So at this time, I agree. It is not the right time to increase minimum wage. I do believe we should delay it. And then 1 year from now, see what's happening. Maybe the economy will get better. Maybe things will go back to normal. But we'll see when that time comes. And if we need to delay further, then let's delay further. But right now, I do agree that at this time, increasing the minimum wage is not a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominic, for your testimony. I'd like to now recognize Dean Huntsman for his testimony.
Yes, good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Dean Huntsman. I'm the Vice President Operations for DUCIT, the DUCIT organization here in Guam. We represent the DUCIT Tani Guam, the DUCIT Beach Resort Guam, and the Plaza Shopping Mall, which represents just under about 1,000 employees. As I'm sure all of you know, the tourism business is the cornerstone of our economy here in Guam. And I think we all agree that the amazing people that work in our hotels and restaurants and tourism related industries are really the cornerstone of what drives this industry. They're the ones who are making these experiences, making these memories, delighting our customers and visitors to Guam that bring them back here year after year. And I think, we would all agree that they should be well compensated and properly compensated for what they do. The COVID-19 situation hit us here in Guam, and it has been catastrophic for our industry. I wouldn't characterize that we are in recovery mode. We are in survival mode right now. We're in a mode where we're just trying to make it through, get through to the other side. We know the other side is coming. The future of Guam is there. Tourism will come back. When it will come back, we don't really know right now, but we are in survival mode. Recovery mode will come once we know that there is some business starting to flow back into our organization. I think from our point of view, creating or offering an increase in salaries at this time, where we're just trying to create jobs and keep our people employed as best as we can, would not be productive. I think we just ask that we wait 12 months until we're back on a more solid footing. There's a knock-on effect from increasing minimum wage. It runs all the way up through the organization because we need to keep increasing salaries to make it equitable for those people that have certain skills and so forth. It would be terrible to put businesses in a situation where they need to start to reduce benefits and reduce hours and reduce manning and reduce hiring because their expenses are just not in control. For every dollar that we spend on payroll, on cash payroll, we spend another 30 cents. That's 30% more on things like life insurance, medical coverage, meals, personal time off, 401k, holidays. It's an additional 30% more on top of what we pay on the minimum wage. So it would be terrible to be put in a situation where we had to start to look at those added benefits that we provide our employees in order to survive. So I think all we're asking is some delay in the increase. Let us survive this COVID pandemic. Let us get through it. Let us rebuild. And then we can all share the success of the economy and economic growth in Guam. I really appreciate the time here today. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Huntsman, for your words, and I appreciate you taking the time as well to provide testimony on Bill 24-36. Okay, so next on the list to provide testimony is Monty Mesa from GPO Outlets.
I unmute. Good evening, Chairman Perez and committee members. My name is Monty Mesa, and I representing the Guam Premier Outlet tenants, both national tenants as well as local tenants. And we are in support of Bill 2436, which seeks only to place a 1-year moratorium on the implementation of the second tier increase of the minimum wage. Please let me be clear that we are not against raising the minimum wage to better compensate our island's workforce. However, we are against it raising the minimum wage at this time when our economy is at its lowest point. I think the previous speakers, as well as one of the employees who spoke, I think that, you know, if we are all in this together, then we must work together in trying to survive this. And I agree with the survival mode that we're in. We used to have 75 local tenants, to include national tenants at GPO. We're down to 49 tenants. We've lost tenants in the last 10 months, and it's not going to stop there. Businesses today, not only here at GPO, but also as well as 2 months hence, are looking to survive. And as landlords, we're working with all of our tenants to try to keep them operating, and we understand the difficulties they're going through. Like many other businesses on island, you know, we all have suffered great losses as a direct result of this pandemic. Some tenants have not rehired their full staff due to the fact that they have to cut costs to make ends meet. Raising the minimum wage at this time will affect our local tenants' ability to pay their employees rent and other bills associated with running their operations. We are already going through this particular dilemma, and we are working with all of them to try to keep them in business. Some already have closed, and if you have visited both GPO and 2 Months Hence Plaza, you see that already stores have shut down. This reduces the government's ability also to generate GRT, which is what we're trying to keep here in maintaining the government revenues. We understand again that, you know, this is hopefully a temporary situation that we're looking at. And as each time we're being very optimistically cautious in growing back our visitor market. Without it, we will not sustain. Our current local businesses, we have at GPO now 22 local businesses out of 49 that are holding on and are on a survival mode. We have a total of 1,200, a little bit over 1,200 employees at GPO. I'm proud to say that 80% are above the minimum wage. We have actually 21% are at the current minimum level, and most of these are students who are working as salespeople in the stores or in the restaurants. And based on our past experience, raising the minimum wage will have a trickle effect on the prices to do business in Guam overall. We will also see increases in prices of goods, products, and services that our local consumers want and need. This potential increase would be inflicting on our local residents during this time when the expandable income may be also limited. I want to make it clear again in closing that we are not against raising the minimum wage. We are only against it being raised at this point in time. And that's what we're asking you, Madam Chairman, and the rest of the committee members to consider as we continue to survive this 10 months now ongoing of this pandemic. And until our visitor market returns, both from Japan and South Korea, then we can start to recover much more healthier, and hopefully that implementing and delaying this minimum wage can happen in 12 months from now. So I appreciate again the opportunity to speak on behalf of our GPO tenants and our shopping center. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and support this bill introduced by Senator Moylan, Senator Blas, and Senator Torres. And we look forward to hopefully getting some support from the rest of the senators there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Mesa, for your testimony on delaying the minimum wage. So now I'd like to recognize Milton Morinaga to provide testimony regarding Bill 24-36.
Thank you. Let me read my testimony I have written here. Hafaday, Madam Chair, Senator Sabina Perez, and a member of the 36th Guam Legislature. My name is Milton Morinaga. I'm the Senior Advisor for PHR Micronesia, the managing corporation of the following entity: Sheraton Laguna Guam Resort, Hilton Guam Resort and Spa, Pacific Island Clubs, Hyatt Regency Guam, Tsubaki Tower Guam, Hotel Nikko Guam, Country Club of Pacific, Spa Aliulam at the Hilton and Nikko. I appear before you on behalf of PHR Micronesia today to submit testimony in support of Bill 2436. Considering the current state of economy caused by the COVID pandemic and acknowledging that our tourism industry has basically ground to a halt, we feel that delaying the implementation of the second tier increase of the minimum wage will greatly help all companies in a fragile state, not just ours, survive this pandemic. Prior to the pandemic, our island regularly welcomed around 1.5 million visitors annually, generating about $2.5 billion in business sales and revenues, while supporting approximately a third of the island's employment. For fiscal year 2020, visitor arrivals plummeted by minus 53.6% versus the previous year, from an average of 1.5 million visitors annually to less than 800,000. To be exact, 757,385 actual arrivals. Tourism and 21,000 plus people and employees have truly experienced adverse impact in this global pandemic. All of our feeder markets have closed their borders, and our tourism industry is not likely to see a return in a meaningful visitors' arrivals, at least until the end of 2021. Our hotels have gone from average occupancy of 89% to 30% in 2020. It could have been much lower if USS Ted Roosevelt has not arrived. Due to the pandemic, our businesses experienced a revenue loss of $158 million from 2019 to 2020. The payroll cost of $67 million is hurting us greatly. While businesses have been able to rely on a somewhat steady flow of military guests and a smaller number of local guests in weekends, our business model is based on 1.5 million tourists annually. As an example, our operating costs of 10% occupancy are not hugely different than we were at 80%. With the recent increase of indoor dining to 50%, our staffing costs are not hugely different than our restaurant were open to 100% dining. We simply can't survive like this. Our business are, as are all the business in Tumon, in a very fragile state. Now is not the time to add to our cost by triggering an increase to the minimum wage. Please allow for a delay until 2022. PHR Micronesia is one of the largest employers in our island's tourism industry. We take great pride in our effort to provide meaningful, enjoyable visit experiences for our guests. We acknowledge that we would not be able to do this without the roughly 2,400 team members employed in our facilities. In this pandemic time, we've done absolutely everything in our power to keep as many of them gainfully employed as possible. While I understand and acknowledge that employees should be fairly compensated, and we do our everyday best to ensure this, raising the minimum wage at this time will ultimately hurt our businesses. Currently, 80% of our employees are hourly employees. The proposed increase will impact our payroll an additional $2 million in 2021. We are not out of the woods yet. While Guam could easily open its door to visitors, we do not know about continued quarantine requirements for our guests arriving in Guam or upon their return home. Just because we are open for business does not guarantee that the tourists will come back immediately. Guam is still a situation where our hotels and restaurants could face shutdown. We depend highly on Japan and Korea market segments. We are struggling due to COVID-19 and the reduced revenue for the foreseeable future. We are looking for all possible ways to cut costs. Unfortunately, this means more job losses. Raising the minimum wage at this time could be a final blow to the hotel restaurant businesses as we struggle to regain our footing. Additionally, a wage increase at this time could be compounded by the present COVID requirements of increased sanitizing efforts and personal protective supplies for all workers. Due to the ongoing economic fallout of COVID-19, we urge legislature to delay the increase of minimum wage from March 1st, 2021 to March 1st, 2022. PHR supports all initiatives that protect our tourism industry and workers and the intent of this legislature. We thank you for your support and consideration. Jesus Maasi, thank you.
Jesus Maasi, Mr. Morinaga, for your testimony. We appreciate that. So now I'd like to recognize Jane Flores, a member of the Guam Women's Chamber of Commerce, to provide testimony.
Thank you so much, Senator Perez. I am Jane Flores. I am a board member and the government committee chair of the Guam Women's Chamber of Commerce, and I'm testifying on behalf of the GWCC and President Laura Nelson Cepeda. The Guam Women's Chamber of Commerce recognizes that the issue of whether, how, and when to institute a minimum wage increase is multifaceted. The GWCC has addressed and supported an increase in the minimum wage on Guam in the past. When the original legislation resulting in Public Law 3538 was introduced back in 2019, we surveyed our members, most of whom are small business owners. Slightly less than half of the respondents, 47%, supported the proposed $1 gradual increase in the minimum wage to $9.25 an hour by March 2021, with 40 of the respondents opposed to the increase and 11% undecided. Our small business owners expressed the following concerns about a minimum wage increase. It may cause small businesses to increase prices to cover the increase in wages. It may cause small businesses to lay off workers, to reduce workers' hours, to reduce workers' benefits, to freeze the hiring of employees, to put off expansion plans, or it may force small businesses out of business. The GWCC also held a minimum wage forum on June 6, 2019, with the following experts to discuss the issue: Joseph Bradley, Chief Economist and Senior Vice President of the Bank of Guam; Catherine DeKnight Gale, Executive Director of the Employers Council; Gary Hiles, Chief Economist of Guam Department of Labor; Charlotte Huntsman, President, Society for Human Resource Management, Guam Chapter; James Martinez, President of the Guam Contractors Association; and Mary Rhodes, Executive Director of the Guam Hotel and Restaurant Association, whom you heard from earlier. Although some of these experts noted at the time that a slight increase in minimum wage would not greatly affect the overall economy or large businesses, they raised the issue of the compression of wages, that many companies already paying above minimum wage would be compelled to raise the wages of next level employees in order to keep them on their payroll and keep them from feeling devalued because of the increase in wages to less experienced, less qualified employees. They also noted that most businesses were already paying above minimum wage because market forces at the time dictated such a wage. These experts recommended again at the time that the market continue to dictate the minimum wage. It's important to note that studies have shown that an increase in the minimum wage, which is not designed to be a living wage, generally does not improve the economic status of those residents at a community's lowest socioeconomic level. The consensus of the GWCC's Minimum Wage Forum 18 months ago was to support market-driven wage levels that allow companies to appropriately compensate and keep valuable employees. Suggestions were made to instead focus on government incentives that encourage skills and professional development that enable employees to earn valuable wages and benefits. That was before March 2020. Enter the COVID-19 global pandemic. Many of our small businesses have been struggling to stay afloat since late March of last year, as you've heard, when the pandemic forced the island to literally shut down. The unforeseen costs of the pandemic have included increased operating expenses, such as the purchase of required health and safety supplies, digital programs and communication, as well as reconfigurations or improvements to existing spaces to accommodate for social distancing requirements and more. To ask these businesses to bring back employees at 50 cents an hour more 1 month from now or shortly thereafter would create a burden that frankly may cause some to not be able to open their doors again. It may be, as you've heard before, the proverbial nail in the coffin for some of our businesses. Implementing the 50-cent increase in March may also cause many business owners to make the heart-wrenching decision of who to keep on staff and who to lay off just to meet this requirement and stay afloat. Another facet of this issue is that because many businesses will already have to bring back employees at a few at a time rather than all at once due to a slowly reawakening economy, perhaps now may be a time to institute a gradual increase in Guam's minimum wage. Perhaps the law could allow for delayed implementation or paused implementation for up to 1 year. That way, businesses could institute the increase gradually as they bring back more employees to meet customer demands when tourists start to return and our economy slowly reawakens. Yet another facet to consider is that the Federal Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, or the PUA program, may provide a portion of the population with more money for the next 13 weeks than they may make with their regular jobs. A slight increase in the minimum wage may provide some with the incentive to go back to work. As mentioned earlier, the issue of an increase in the minimum wage is complicated. The pandemic complicates this issue even further. One of our objectives at the GWCC is to advocate for competitive wages and benefits for women in the workforce. However, we realize that while the island is picking up the pieces of its shattered economy, it may not be the best or most opportune time for a minimum wage increase, even though many employees would benefit from the extra income. Therefore, we support Bill 2436, which states that the 50-cent increase in Guam's minimum wage from $8.75 to $9.25 per hour, slated to take effect on March 1st, 2021, be delayed or paused 1 year, giving businesses until March 1st, 2022 to implement the increase. Thank you for the opportunity to provide these perspectives on this important issue.
Masi, Ms. Flores, for your testimony. So the last on the list is from Guam Association of Realtors, Sean Blas, but I believe we have Peggy, who's going to provide testimony in his place. Is that correct?
Yes, half a day. I hope everyone is doing very well today, or this evening, should I say. A very short testimony coming from the Guam Association of Realtors, and on behalf of our president, Sean Blas, who is unable to join us this evening. In our statement, we are in support in delaying or pausing the minimum wage increase as to the stated proposal by the senators. We further would like to share our stance that as most of our members of the Guam Association of Realtors serve our employers themselves and serve other business owners as well as employees. And these increase during this challenging period in our economy will not help, rather create further burden in the recovery of the local businesses as they try to pursue further improvements in how they can sustain their business as well as maintain their employees employed. The ability to have and maintain job during this challenging period far exceeds the need to have an increase in the minimum wage at this time. We are not against the increase. However, we definitely support the delay of it to give a breather to the rest of our local businesses who are currently on recovery mode, and as some of the testimonies presented here, on survival mode. So we urge the senators to pass this bill in support of delaying the minimum wage. Thank you all very much. Have a pleasant evening.
Thank you so much, Peggy, for your testimony and for being here tonight. So just for the record, we have reached out to Director Dave De La Sola, who's swamped with the extended PUA at this moment, but my colleagues have questions they want for me to forward to him. I would, welcome that as well. So at this time, I'd like to open the floor to my colleagues for any questions, and I believe Secretary Amanda Shelton, you have any questions for those that have testified here today?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I appreciate all of the testimony from our business community here, our chamber representatives. Thank you very much for the insight on this bill. Well, Madam Chair, I was hoping that the Department of Labor would be joining us in this hearing. Unfortunately, they aren't, but I'd like to ask you if you can forward along the question is, what is the number of minimum wage workers we currently have in our workforce? And I don't know if maybe one of our chamber representatives from the Guam Chamber, from the Women's Chamber, possibly could give us an idea of that number.
Senator Shelton, I don't know the exact number, but I do know that Director De La Sola has said publicly that 35,000 workers have been affected by the pandemic, and one would assume, because most of them are in the Guam tourism industry, that a good portion of those 35,000 make minimum wage or maybe a little bit above. So if that helps.
Okay, thank you very much, Jane. Thank you for that. That would be my only question. I was hoping that we could learn a little bit more from the Department of Labor as well. If there's an opportunity at a later time, maybe a supplemental hearing, or if you can include that in the committee report, I'd really appreciate it, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Shelton. I'll definitely forward that question to him as well. Okay, so any other questions from my colleagues? Yes, Senator Taitukwi, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you to everyone who also testified here tonight. I greatly appreciate your insight. I definitely want to recognize one testimony that was really, basically really showed us the reality of what would happen to an individual if the minimum wage did go up. And that was Dominic Hernandez, who just landed a job. I mean, the testimony was very, it's an eye opener on the reality, you sitting there as an employee. So I greatly appreciate you bringing it up about your situation. It says a lot. Again, too, I share the same sentiments as my other colleague. I had other questions to Department of Labor. And I think most of us has answered the post when asked about the minimum wage and how we feel about, the delaying it. And I had mentioned in my interview with the Post that I'm looking at even having an economic impact report one that they did before when they raised the minimum wage. I think that, we're praying and hoping that our economy revives itself by the middle of this year or even the end of this year, but we may not even know and if that should happen. So I'd like to ask the Department of Labor to implement an economic impact study, how much that would cost. Would they be able to have assistance from GITA in order to pay for this kind of report? And if we could even do that now, I mean, I think that those who are unsure about raising the minimum wage, if they saw that this type of report that was done based in our economic crisis that we're in, and the data, which we rely so much on data, would help us make that decision in moving forward. But to most business people, and I've run a couple businesses myself, it's really a no-brainer, that right now, if you were to raise the minimum wage right now in a climate that we're in, either you look at closing down or having to let a few people go. And that's something that's very, I think Christine Baleto made it clear. You could hear it in her heart, how hard it was. And some of these businesses, Madam Chair, were closing their businesses before the pandemic because in some areas it was not very economical to move forward because of the climate, even on the raise of the last minimum wage. So my question would have to be to Department of Labor, asking for that economic impact study, if that's something that can be done in this legislation right now, be amended on the floor to include moving forward. So other than that, again, I appreciate everyone who's here today. And thank you so much for all you're doing right now for those who you're trying to keep employed so that they can take care of their families. I greatly appreciate the sacrifices businesses make. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator Taitakui. Yes, and I would definitely reach out to Director Mendiola from GITA to see if they can provide an expedited report, perhaps, because I know the implementation date is coming around the corner in March. So yeah, thank you for that suggestion. I believe we also have Senator Joanne Brown, who's joined us here today as well. Thank you, Senator. So any other questions or testimonies? Sorry, are there any other questions from my colleagues?
Madam Chair?
Yes, you're recognized, Senator Joe.
All right, thank you. And I'd like to thank the businesses for testifying. I was the author of the bill that increased the minimum wage. And there are a lot of factors involved, and I agree with them. Keep afloat. Maybe the minimum wage doesn't need to increase. Department of Labor's economic or GITA's report, get the economist report. Madam Chair, I did send to you, I just received it today. We got to keep in mind for the businesses in Guam, I'm worried more about what the U.S. Congress is going to do. It's all over the news. They're looking at a $15 increase in minimum wage. How do we react to that? I don't know. But I just want to keep everybody afloat that we just watch and see what's going on. Even though on the post, I'm not in support of delaying it, but also I'm taking a look at all the factors that are involved. On the increase, on having the minimum wage increase in March, or delaying it 6 months, or even the whole year, or maybe just watch what's going on in the U.S. Congress, because if they increase the minimum wage to $15, we can forget about the 50 cents. It'll jump shot, and then I'm worried about all the business on Guam. Where do we stand? That's what I'm worried about. And I hope I'm coming across fairly decent, Madam Chair. If I'm fading in and out, I think Monty, you brought it up, but I do want to support the business on their staying afloat. I've got Milton there, good friends of mine, and several of you I know. I want to keep business afloat. There's no doubt. But minimum wage was something that was pursued. and it passed. Now we need to measure. Now, do we need to keep it? And if not, then we'll pause at it. All right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Joe. So we did receive information from Catherine Castro that according to a PDN article, there are 3,000 minimum wage workers according to a PDN article in January of 2020. So that was the last, but we'll definitely follow up with the Department of Labor. So are there any other questions from my colleagues at this time? Yes, Speaker Terlahi, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And my true thanks to all of those who took the time to testify today, and to especially express, very sincerely how their businesses have fared throughout this pandemic. And you've, I admire that you've continued to fight for not just your own business, but for all businesses, and that we want to partner with you in this, of course. And so I hear you that the impact on businesses from an increase in March is really going to put some over the edge. And so we don't want to push that. And, whether it's a year or any other time frame, as my colleagues have said, I am looking for what would be that determinant factor as to when is the right time, after this, because we've heard some predictions that it would take 3 years for the tourism industry to come back full force. We've heard, 1 year might be enough for the majority of the businesses. That kind of information I would like your thoughts on as to what the factor would be. Do we go back to what was our, what did our numbers show prior to the pandemic? But I'm not sure what we'll be seeing next March, but I do understand the impacts, and but I just feel, and so of course, the bill is good in that regard, in that it's going to assist these businesses. I think when we passed the minimum wage in the same year, we also passed a bill to give a break on the GRTs to businesses within a certain income limit, or gross receipts level. And so similarly, I think, putting off this minimum wage kind of puts off what we were trying to remedy by increasing the wage in the first place. And putting that off is what concerns me. And so I just think it's a little bit, we have a burden, the government and us as policymakers, to combine with this putting off a minimum wage, another way to remedy what we were trying to remedy, and that is families that are severely impacted, and that, changing the minimum wage, would have helped them a little bit. And I just think we just have to continue to find ways to help them throughout the next year and until they have also fully recovered. I think families are also in survival mode. And so I would suggest that we look at these things together as a package. But so I want to thank you again for all the testimony today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Speaker Terlahi. Yes, I would like to reiterate some of the sentiments that, businesses have had a heart in regards to ensuring that, giving that handout to the employees to make sure that they are able to make ends meet. And we do appreciate that. And considering the PUA extension, the change in the law where, now it does not apply to workers that are part-time. And so, yes, the impact to those workers, should there be an increase at this time, is something to really think about and deliberate. That could mean less workers, a loss of workers, and that's something that our body is going to deliberate and take seriously. And so I want to thank everyone who's come out here tonight to give your time and provide some heartfelt testimony in regards to the livelihoods for not only your business, but for those that depend upon it. So I'd just like to offer any more opportunities for my colleagues to provide comments or questions before we move on to closing. Okay, so Senator Moylan.
Hi, Senator. This is Monty Mesa.
Yes, hi, Mr. Mesa.
Yes, I would like to make one comment, and I know the government needs to generate revenues. I understand that completely. I want to make a suggestion for the government to consider a potential revenue source to help through this disruption that we're having locally with all our businesses. And that's one I know that I talked to Senator Joe San Agustin, as well as now Senator Frank Blas Jr. And this is a question now that we need to look at in raising revenues. And this is on all packages coming into the post office from Amazon. We need to tax the use tax at 4%. This is not a level playing field for our local businesses who apply for business license and pay the business taxes here, and companies, online companies shipping into Guam and not paying a dime or a penny on paying taxes on Guam. This is unfair playing field for all businesses that pay the GRT or pay for the business license to do business on Guam. I think this is one area, and I'll tell you, there's 50 containers up there now at the post office that we could be generating 4% on every package that comes in from Amazon or any other online company that's shipping directly into Guam, and we are not getting a penny of income from those things. This is unfair to all businesses that are here on Guam, are committed to do business, pay the taxes that is necessary to stay in business. I would hopefully have all of you consider this as one thing that we need to look at, and possibly, moving to a sales tax format rather than a GRT. I understand that may be something that is complicated, but I think one thing now that we have in the books is a use tax, and we pay it every time we bring in something that we don't sell for retail. We have to pay a 4% use tax. Why is it only the businesses are paying that and everybody else that orders online gets a free ride? This is unfair, and this needs to look at, because this, in my conservative calculation, is a $16 million annual revenue to this government. If this is not looked into, then we are kidding ourselves. I ask all of you to look into this, and it can be done. It can pay for itself. This is something that I'm suggesting you guys look at, some revenue source, and that's one big revenue, in my humble opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mesa. And we'll definitely follow up on that discussion when the time comes for that bill. All right, so thank you everyone again. And I would like to now recognize Senator Moylan for his closing on Bill 24-36.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to point out a few that have also turned in written testimony in favor of this bill. That's, for example, Kentucky Fried Chicken, Chinese Chamber, Westin Hotel, Payless Market, Subway, Pacific Star, Guam Contractors Association, the Asia Pacific Financial Management, the Korean Chamber of Commerce, Triple J Enterprise, and Bakers & Son, just to name a few. I want to thank the panel and those who had the opportunity and took the time out to testify in favor of this bill. Over 10 of you were really very supportive of seeing this bill through, and you gave excellent examples of how it affects how we function and how we do business on Guam and how we can improve the island. So I'm hoping through your pleas that this bill does move forward. And Madam Chair, I want to offer my assistance to provide in completing these committee reports, because we know this bill would need to meet session floor by February in order for it to be implemented, since March 1st is just around the corner. So we have this opportunity. So thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to the panel today. I'm looking forward to moving this bill forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Moylan. And yes, that's why we're holding the public hearing tonight, so we can get a committee report as soon as possible. So if there are no further testimonies or questions, the Committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation, Labor Procurement, Statistics, Research and Planning will adjourn this virtual public hearing. The time now is 6:49 p.m. Thank you, everyone, and be safe.